Hello, and welcome back to Nocturne Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy chilling tales that drift through the Nocturne Noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. I had only made it about a quarter of the way through the story before I groaned and stopped reading. The next sentence was describing enormous mountains rising over the Arctic, with huge glaciers stretching between them like frozen rivers. I stared at the words for a few seconds, already annoyed. There were no mountains where I was. There were no glaciers. There was almost nothing at all. That was the part people never seemed to understand when they wrote stories about the Arctic. They pictured dramatic cliffs, bright blue ice, beautiful northern lights, snow-covered peaks, and endless, untouched wilderness. The real place around me was far less romantic. It was flat, painfully flat. Snow, frozen ground, low ridges, gray sky, and more snow. That was it. Of course, I knew I was being unfair. I was reading a fictional story about the Arctic, while actually sitting in the Arctic, somewhere most people would never visit in their entire lives. I was roughly 50 miles from the northern edge of Alaska, close enough to the top of the world that I could have made the whole situation sound dramatic if I wanted to. But I wasn't feeling dramatic. I wasn't interested in being understanding either. After spending nearly 2 months living in an oil field camp, I had lost most of my patience. Camp life wasn't adventurous. It wasn't exciting. It was exhausting. I was tired of using bags for the bathroom. I was tired of the endless mechanical hum of generators. I was tired of the same salty food, the same faces, the same metal walls, and the same frozen landscape every time I looked outside. More than anything, I wanted to go home. I closed the story on my laptop and leaned back in my chair. Through the small, crank-style window beside me, I could see a few caribou standing far away on the horizon. They looked miserable. Yesterday, there had been 4 of them. Today, there were 5. They barely moved. Every once in a while, one would lower its head and scrape weakly at the snow with a hoof, searching for moss or anything else edible beneath the frozen surface. Otherwise, they simply stood there. Even turning their heads seemed like too much effort. Every unnecessary movement meant burning energy. And energy was something animals couldn't waste during an Arctic winter. So they remained almost perfectly still, their thin bodies turned against the wind, staring toward the same empty gray horizon I had been staring at. For a strange moment, I imagined walking out there and joining them. Maybe I could stand beside them for the remaining days of my hitch. Maybe staring at nothing would finally cure the cabin fever growing inside my skull. A knock on the metal door pulled me from the thought. "Supplies came in," Ryan said through the partially open doorway. That was all. He didn't wait for me to answer. The door closed again. I sighed and stood. I pulled on my jacket and stepped outside, moving almost automatically. Everything at camp had become muscle memory by that point. Wake up. Work 12 hours, eat, read, sleep, repeat. 2 cardboard boxes with my name on them were sitting with the new supplies. They had arrived behind a massive red Steiger machine that had dragged a supply sled across the frozen ground. Workers were unloading equipment while the engine idled. The wind carried the smell of hot diesel exhaust directly into my face. Normally, I hated the smell, but against air that cold, the fumes almost felt strangely comforting. Warm, dirty air mixing with the freezing wind. I picked up both boxes. Neither weighed much. Immediately, I knew something from my order was probably missing. I wonder what they forgot this time, I muttered. I carried the boxes back inside. 2 weeks earlier, I had ordered a handful of personal supplies. Nothing exciting, just little things that made living in camp slightly easier. I opened the first box with a knife and quickly checked everything inside. As expected, some things were there, some weren't. I didn't even have enough energy to get angry about it. I accepted whatever the supply expediter had decided I deserved. When I finished unpacking, I flattened both cardboard boxes and placed them against the wall. I'd take them to the incinerator later. At least that would give me something to do during the quiet part of the night shift. Maybe I'd read another story before then. Life in the oil fields ran on repeat for 60 days at a time. 12-hour shifts, oversalted food, portable industrial buildings dragged from one section of tundra to another every week or two. No trees, no towns, no real signs of ordinary human life. Just machines, metal buildings, frozen ground, and hundreds of exhausted workers living in a place that clearly didn't want us there. Most animals with any sense left the region during winter. Even the sun disappeared for part of the season. Yet there we were, 200 people sitting in steel boxes on the tundra, pretending this was a reasonable place to live. Books and stories helped. A good story could pull you out of camp for a while. For an hour or two, you could forget the generators, forget the cold, forget the smell, forget that the nearest comfortable bed was hundreds of miles away. Unfortunately, for reasons I couldn't understand, the Arctic had suddenly become popular in the horror stories. Every other story seemed to be about some scientist trapped in Arctic ice, some ancient monster under a glacier, or some explorer walking through mountain passes that didn't exist. I couldn't even escape the place through fiction anymore. I opened another story. Within a few paragraphs, I already hated it. It felt empty, formulaic, like it had been created from a list of popular horror words rather than written by someone who actually cared. The cover art was even worse. Some fake, antique-looking image covered in a dirty yellow filter, probably meant to look mysterious and old. That was enough. I shut the laptop harder than necessary. I needed to walk. We already ate slop for meals. I wasn't going to consume mental slop, too. I grabbed the flattened boxes and left my room. 10 more days, I whispered to myself while walking. Then I corrected myself. 10 more days, give or take a few. Weather delays happened constantly. Flights got canceled. Machines broke. Sometimes a 10-day countdown became 12 or 15. Fuck. Normally, I might have entertained myself by leaving a sarcastic comment under the story. But tonight, I was too irritated even for that. After 50 days in camp, everything bothered me. The way people chewed, the way doors slammed, the way generators hummed, the way someone laughed too loudly in the dining hall. Everything became personal after enough time in isolation. The incinerator sat near the edge of camp. It was exactly what the name suggested. A structure built for burning garbage and human waste. In an Arctic camp, there weren't many reasonable options for the trash disposal. You couldn't simply send garbage trucks out every morning, so almost everything that could burn eventually went into the incinerator. A camp of 200 workers produced an impressive amount of waste every day. Clear bags held ordinary garbage. Black bags held what everyone politely avoided discussing. All of it was stored inside a large iron cage before being burned. The cage kept bears and other animals from tearing through the bags. The furnace burned almost constantly. On still days, the smoke could crawl across the tundra for miles, a long black stain stretching over the otherwise empty land. Nobody stayed beside the incinerator every minute of the night. There wasn't much danger of the surrounding tundra catching fire. Everything was frozen. That night, I was alone when I arrived. I tossed the flattened cardboard into the burn barrel and stood near the heat for a while. Beyond the camp lights was complete darkness. The Arctic didn't slowly fade into night. At the edge of the halogen lights, the world simply disappeared. Standing there, I finally felt some of my anger fading. The incinerator was far enough from the main buildings that the constant mechanical noise wasn't as overwhelming. The generators sounded distant. The workers were distant. The world felt quiet. For the first time that evening, my thoughts slowed. Then I heard something clicking. I frowned. At first I thought it might be part of the furnace, metal expanding, something loose in the wind. But the sound came again. Click, click, click. It was coming from beyond the lights. I stepped closer to the cage and stared into the darkness. Something was moving out there. The clicking grew louder. Then the bear alarm exploded through camp. The two-tone siren was impossible to mistake. Every worker knew what it meant. Bear, possibly brown bear, possibly polar bear. Either way, you didn't stay exposed. I ran straight for the iron garbage cage. It was the closest structure, strong enough to protect me if a bear came charging out of the darkness. I slammed the grated door behind me and locked it. Garbage bags shifted under my boots while I tried to find stable footing. The clicking continued, but now I could see shapes moving beyond the edge of the lights. At first, I thought it was one large shape. Then I realized there were dozens, then hundreds. Caribou. The tiny herd I had been watching from my window wasn't tiny anymore. A massive herd was moving through camp. They weren't running exactly. Caribou didn't have much extra energy to waste during winter, but they were moving quickly. Quickly enough that I could tell something had frightened them. My radio crackled inside my coat. "Martha, do you copy?" Jay's voice came through the speaker. I pulled the radio free. "Go for Martha." "Is that you by the incinerator?" "Affirmative." "Are you okay?" I watched the animals approaching. "Yeah. We don't know if there's actually a bear," Jay said. Something spooked the caribou. They don't usually move like this for nothing. Not even wolves get them this worked up, so we sounded the alarm to be safe. The radio went quiet for a second. Then he added, "You warm enough? You might be stuck there a while." "I'm fine. It's not that cold tonight." That was relative, of course. "Stay put," Jay said. "We'll clear camp and get you when it's safe." "Copy." The radio fell silent. The herd reached the incinerator. The clicking became incredibly loud. I knew what caused the sound. Caribou tendons make a strange snapping or clicking noise when they walk. It helps members of a herd keep track of one another during darkness or heavy snow. Normally, hearing one caribou make that noise was interesting. Hearing hundreds of them at once was disturbing. Their bodies were speaking through bones and tendons. Click, 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 click. Steam poured from their nostrils. Their legs snapped mechanically with every step. Some pushed against the animals in front of them. Others glanced nervously behind. They weren't stampeding, but they were definitely trying to leave something behind. I pressed myself deeper into the cage. A few caribou noticed me. They barely cared. Whatever was behind them frightened them far more than I did. They separated around the incinerator, flowing around it like water around a rock. One animal passed close enough that the firelight illuminated its face. Its eye caught the light. The pupil narrowed into a horizontal slit surrounded by a strange blue iris. For only a moment our eyes met. I saw fear, not simple animal nervousness. Fear. Then it disappeared with the herd. Several minutes passed. The clicking faded into the darkness. I relaxed slightly. Then another click came from behind them, slow, uneven. Click, pause, click. Something else was coming. One last caribou stepped into view. Immediately, I knew something was wrong with it. Its head hung low. Its body was painfully thin. Even compared with the other starving winter animals, this one looked close to death. Its legs didn't move together properly. Every joint cracked when it stepped. Not just the normal tendon click. Its entire body sounded like something being forced into shapes it wasn't designed to make. It came closer. The temperature suddenly seemed much colder. The animal stepped into the firelight, then stopped. Its head tilted slightly, almost like it couldn't see me. Its eyes were dull, yellow. Its coat should have been pale, but instead it was stained with a dirty yellow-brown color. It looked as though it had rolled through crude oil and then been left to dry. For reasons I couldn't explain, my first thought was that it looked fake. Not sick, not injured. Fake. Like something had built a caribou after seeing one from far away. I lifted my radio. "Hey, Jay!" The animal's head snapped toward me. The crack of its neck was loud enough to make me flinch. I stopped speaking. Its empty yellow eyes stared directly at me. Then it moved toward the cage. I backed away. The animal reached the stairs. To my disbelief, it climbed them. Caribou weren't supposed to casually walk up graded industrial stairs. This one did. Badly. Its hooves slipped. Its body jerked. Its limbs bent at strange angles. But it kept coming. The smell reached me before it reached the cage door. Sour meat. Rot. Something chemical. The creature stood on the platform in front of me. Its body was so thin I could see the shapes of bones beneath its skin. Slowly, it lowered its antlers. The antlers were wrong too. Blunt, malformed, uneven. It dragged them across the cage door. Metal screamed against bone. It seemed to be searching for an opening. I started climbing backward over the garbage bags. Black bags rolled beneath me. I nearly fell. The animal lifted one front leg. The joint folded with a wet pop. Its lips pulled back. Its teeth were yellow. They struck the metal door. Clank, clang, clank. Its wet mouth reflected the firelight strangely, almost as though there was light coming from inside it. Then someone shouted, "Hey! Hey!" Jay was running toward us. He waved his arms and yelled at the animal. The caribou reacted instantly. It jerked sideways, too fast. It launched itself over the railing. Its body hit the frozen ground hard. I heard multiple cracks. For several seconds, it kicked and twisted on the snow. Then suddenly, it found its feet and sprinted into the darkness. The speed was unbelievable. Jay reached the cage and stared at me, buried among garbage bags. "I know everyone jokes that you're trashy," he said, "but this is getting ridiculous." I didn't laugh. "Did you see that thing?" He shrugged. "Just a sick caribou. It looked fucking possessed. You've survived worse." He opened the cage. Then he looked at the garbage covering my clothes. "Jesus, go clean yourself up." By the next day, the original small herd hadn't returned. Workers later reported seeing a large group of caribou several miles away, near a 100-foot bluff overlooking the frozen Colville River. Some were dead, others were badly injured. A few were still alive below the cliff, dragging useless legs across the ice. Apparently, Much of the herd had gone over the edge. Camp management immediately had a problem. The land belonged to the Inupiat people, and tribal representatives demanded an explanation. Management insisted nobody from camp had chased the herd. Nobody had harassed them. Nobody had driven machines toward them. It had been a freak accident. At least that was the official explanation. Whatever investigations, fines, or arguments followed weren't my concern. I had other things to worry about. I stepped outside hoping to find someone smoking. Nobody was there. I cursed. Then cursed again when I nearly stepped into yellow snow. Urine didn't burn, so men often pissed outside rather than putting more waste through camp systems. Management constantly told people not to piss along the main walking paths. They did it anyway. The yellow stains were everywhere. Sometimes they were almost the only color visible against the gray and white landscape. I was tired of looking at them. I was tired of being able to guess someone's hydration level from frozen piss. Then I noticed Ryan standing in the middle of the path. His legs were spread slightly. At first I assumed he was contributing another yellow patch to the snow. "Ryan," I called. He didn't respond. "Ryan?" Nothing. "For fuck's sake, don't piss there." Still nothing. Then I realized he wasn't urinating. He was just standing. His body swayed gently. His head leaned backward. For a second, he nearly fell. Then he caught himself and returned to the same strange posture. "Ryan?" He slowly turned toward me. I immediately stopped walking. Something was wrong. The white parts of his eyes had turned a dirty bronze yellow. His skin carried the same strange color. Not normal pale winter skin. Yellow. Waxy. He mumbled something. I couldn't understand a word. "Are you okay?" Ryan stared at me. His expression was empty. His eyes didn't really focus. After several uncomfortable seconds, he turned and slowly wandered away. His steps were uncertain. I watched until he disappeared between buildings. Over the next few days, people started getting sick. At first, nobody panicked. Camp illnesses were common. People called it Camp Crud. Put 200 people together in small buildings, share kitchens, bathrooms, equipment, and vehicles, and eventually somebody brought in a virus. Then everybody got it. The first symptoms weren't dramatic. Fatigue, confusion, weakness, slight discoloration of the skin. Ryan had probably just been one of the first cases. That was what we told ourselves. But people continued getting worse. The yellow color deepened. Their skin changed. It became waxy. Not swollen like fluid retention. Waxy like dead skin. Like frost-bitten flesh after it thaws and stops looking completely human. Their faces sagged strangely. Skin folded in places it shouldn't. Their eyes became cloudy. They became irritable, sometimes angry, sometimes confused. Still, people called it the crud. Nobody wanted to say anything more frightening. One evening, I was sitting in my room reading comments beneath another stolen horror story. The story itself wasn't interesting. Watching everyone attack the person who had copied it was. My door suddenly opened. Jay stood there breathing heavily. He didn't speak. He only pointed toward the window. I got up. Outside, a group of workers were gathering. These were people who had supposedly been too sick to leave their rooms. Now they were standing together, dozens of them. Then they began walking, slowly, south, away from camp. Jay and I watched in silence. Years earlier, a worker had stopped taking his antipsychotic medication during a hitch. He became convinced angels were waiting for him somewhere out on the tundra. One day, he walked away from camp looking for them. People still told the story. It had become one of those camp legends new workers eventually heard. But what we were seeing now was different. This wasn't one person. It was half the camp. Sick workers moved toward the edge of the lights. Nobody stopped them. Nobody wanted to touch them. Nobody knew whether their illness was contagious. We simply watched. One after another, they disappeared into the fog. Nobody said where they were going. Nobody needed to. The Arctic would decide what happened to anyone who walked into it, without proper equipment. We all understood that. We also understood that we had just watched dozens of people walk toward almost certain death. Nobody formally announced an evacuation after that. They didn't need to. The remaining camp exploded into fear. Management tried to calm everyone. People ignored them. Workers started taking machines. Any vehicle that could move over tundra suddenly became transportation. People climbed into empty seats. Crews organized themselves as best they could. We were leaving. Permission could come later. I pulled on my Arctic bibs and gathered the bare essentials into a backpack. I didn't care about clothing. I didn't care about electronics. I didn't care whether I ever saw my bunk again. I kept thinking about the caribou, the sick one. Its yellow eyes, its waxy body, the herd running from it. Had it brought something into camp? A disease? A parasite? Something else? Could madness spread like an infection? Could animals become psychotic? The questions were ridiculous. But everything around me had become ridiculous. I was ready to leave. The door to my bunk always stuck inside its warped metal frame. Normally, I had to hit it with my shoulder. I did exactly that. The door flew open. Something on the other side went down hard. I almost said, "Sorry." Then I saw what I had hit. It looked like Ryan for maybe half a second. Then it moved. The thing spasmed across the hard-packed snow. Its body clicked. It groaned. Too many limbs moved beneath its clothing. Long patches of hair hung from the parts of its body where hair shouldn't have been. Its face changed shape while I watched. Ryan's features appeared, then softened, then stretched, then vanished beneath moving flesh. I stopped breathing. Whatever was outside my door wasn't Ryan. It wasn't even something wearing Ryan exactly. It was something trying to remember what Ryan looked like. The thing rolled helplessly near the bottom of my stairs. For a moment, it reminded me of a large beetle trapped on its back. Its legs rotated. But some of those legs weren't there a second earlier. New limbs seemed to grow from its body. Others shrank back into it. Bones or joints clicked constantly. A shape resembling Ryan's face pushed out from what might have been its head. Above the face, a single twisted antler formed. Then the entire growth burst like a blister. I nearly vomited. The creature still hadn't noticed me. Maybe hitting it with the door had confused it. Maybe confusion was its normal state. I slowly crouched behind the open door. There was no way I could jump over it. The thing covered the base of the stairs. It was larger than a man, much larger than I had first realized. Its body didn't have clear boundaries. Arms blended into legs. Hands formed with too many fingers. Flesh folded and unfolded like it couldn't decide what shape it wanted. I thought about the caribou again. The strange delayed movements. The blind searching. The way it seemed to wait for something to tell it what to do. This creature moved the same way. Like a machine running badly written instructions. I needed to close the door. If I could shut it, maybe the thing wouldn't understand doors. Maybe it didn't have object permanence. Maybe once I disappeared, I stopped existing to it. That was a stupid hope. It was the only hope I had. I reached for the door, slowly. My fingers wrapped around the edge. The creature shifted below. One huge eye rolled inside an oversized socket. The white had turned pale gold. It didn't seem to be looking at anything. I pulled the door, very slowly. Then the hinge squealed. The creature froze. Every limb stopped at once. Its head snapped toward me. I slammed the door. The thing launched forward. It moved like a snake striking. New legs formed beneath it, bending like springs. Its body shot up the stairs. The door closed a fraction of a second before it reached me. Something hit the other side hard enough to shake the wall. I stumbled backward. My room was almost completely dark. The window had been covered to block what little Arctic daylight remained during the winter. That now meant my second escape route was hidden behind screws, foam insulation, plywood, and glass. The creature scratched at the door. The sound was exactly like the caribou dragging its antlers across the incinerator cage. I found the lamp and switched it on. Pale light filled the room. I shoved my small table against the door. Then I pulled the multi-tool from my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly that opening the Phillips screwdriver felt impossible. Outside, the creature scraped and clicked. I attacked the screws holding the window covering. The first screw came loose. I dropped it. The second followed. I dropped that too. By the time I reached the third, the scratching at the door had changed. The creature wasn't randomly searching anymore. It was learning. I heard something touch the handle. Then again, the latch moved slightly. "Come on," I whispered. The third screw fell. There were more. 4, 5, maybe 6. I couldn't remember. I tried tearing the plywood free. It held. I needed at least one more screw. My tool slipped. Again. My fingers barely worked. Finally, another screw came free. I grabbed the plywood with both hands and pulled. The board bent. Wood cracked. I ripped hard enough that part of it splintered. Behind it was foam insulation. I flipped the multi-tool around and used the pliers to tear into the foam. Chunks fell everywhere. The creature struck the door. The table moved. I dug faster. The glass became visible. At the same moment, I heard the door creak open. Light spilled through the widening gap behind me. I didn't look back. I raised the multi-tool and smashed the window. Glass exploded. Pain shot through my hand and forearm. I screamed. Shards had sliced deep into my skin. I grabbed the broken edges anyway. More glass cut me. Blood poured across the sill. In the dim light, it looked almost black. Then I saw the blood pulsing from my wrist. That was bad. Very bad. I'd cut an artery. I knew enough to understand what that meant. But there was no time. If I stayed in the room, the creature would kill me long before blood loss did. I could stop the bleeding later. That was what I told myself. Just get outside. Behind me, the table crashed. The creature entered. I didn't turn around. I pushed myself through the broken window head first. Glass tore my clothes. My body dropped. I hit the frozen snow hard enough to knock the air from my lungs. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. I rolled onto my side, clutching my arm. Blood poured over the snow, bright red against endless white. The creature screamed from the window. Long arms pushed through the narrow opening, glass sliced into them. It didn't seem to care. I staggered to my feet. My vision was already narrowing. I walked, or tried to. Every few steps, my knees weakened. Behind me came another crash. I looked back. The Ryan thing forced itself through the window. Its body changed shape while squeezing through. Limbs stretched, bones folded, skin tore. Then it dropped to the ground. The creature stood, its mouth open. A strange amber glow burned somewhere deep inside its throat. It started toward me. I tried to move faster. I made it only several yards before falling. I rolled onto my knees. The world tilted. My blood formed a red trail behind me. The creature approached. Then I noticed something behind it. A Steiger, one of the massive tracked machines used around camp. It was moving directly toward us. The creature didn't notice. That almost made me laugh. It could copy us. It could imitate faces, grow hands, grow legs, maybe even learn how doors worked. But it didn't understand danger the way humans did. It didn't understand machines. It didn't understand that something weighing tens of thousands of pounds was coming from behind. The Steiger grew closer. So did the creature. I needed only a few more seconds. Unfortunately, I didn't have them. The creature reached me first. A massive limb swung. It struck at my body. The world spun. I flew across the snow like a toy. At almost the same moment, the Steiger reached the creature. The tracks rolled over it. The scream that followed was unlike anything I had ever heard. I landed hard, my vision blurred. The thing thrashed beneath the machine. Its body burst. Thick yellow fluid sprayed across the snow. Not blood. Something like honey. Dark gold. Sticky. Rancid. The machine continued forward, crushing the creature under its tracks. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was somewhere else. A clinic. Not our little remote camp clinic. This was part of the main oil operations facility, much farther from where we had been stationed. My injured arm was wrapped beneath thick layers of gauze. It throbbed with every heartbeat. My entire body felt empty. Weak wasn't enough to describe it. I felt as if death had personally tried to drag me away and become angry when I refused to go. I didn't know who had saved me. Someone had found me. Someone had stopped the bleeding. Someone had moved me away from camp. That meant others must have escaped too. Maybe Jay. Maybe some of the workers who had taken vehicles. I assumed there had been panic, explanations, arguments, stories about yellow-eyed caribou, stories about sick workers wandering into the tundra, stories about something pretending to be Ryan. Surely someone had told the main facility what happened. Surely they understood. For the moment, I was alive. I told myself that meant I was safe. Then I heard a woman speaking on the other side of the thin medical curtain. A clinician. She was talking to another patient. She didn't realize I was awake. Her voice sounded worried. "We're going to have to fly you out," she said. I became completely still. We already have another patient in the other room being transferred in a couple of hours. The medevac is on its way now, so we can arrange for both of you to go together. There was a pause. "But you're going to need a proper hospital. We can't manage this here." My heart started beating faster. The clinician continued. "We don't know what's causing the jaundice." I felt cold. Not Arctic cold, something deeper. "And your cognition is deteriorating quickly." My heart seemed to stop. Jaundice, yellow skin, confusion. That was how it started. Ryan had looked tired, yellow, confused. The others had too. Then their skin became waxy. Then they walked into the tundra. Then Ryan had become something else entirely. I tried to sit up. My body barely responded. I wanted to yell. I wanted to pull the curtain aside and tell the clinician not to put that patient on the medevac. Don't fly them south. Don't take them to a city. Don't take them to a hospital filled with hundreds of people. Don't let whatever happened at our camp leave the Arctic. But I could barely speak. My throat felt dry. My head felt heavy. The medevac was already coming. In a few hours, they were going to carry the infected person onto an aircraft and send them toward civilization. Maybe Anchorage, maybe somewhere farther south. A hospital, doctors, nurses, patients, families, airports, thousands of people. Whatever had started with that strange caribou would no longer be trapped on an empty patch of tundra. Maybe the caribou hadn't brought it to us. Maybe it had only been another victim. Maybe whatever lived beneath that frozen land had always been there. Waiting, learning, copying, and now we had given it exactly what the Arctic never could: transportation. I couldn't shout. I couldn't get out of bed. But I could move one hand. My phone was sitting on the table beside me. I reached for it. My fingers shook as I unlocked the screen. I didn't know who would believe me. I didn't know how much time I had. But I had to warn somebody. Anybody. I opened a blank post and began typing. I work in the Arctic. You've got it all wrong. The cold isn't the most dangerous thing in the tundra. Story 2. I am not holding a pen. I do not even have fingers anymore. Where my hands used to be, there are only black smears, like someone dragged a piece of charcoal across the page and decided that was good enough to represent me. I can no longer feel my palms or the tips of my fingers. I cannot lift my arms. I cannot move away from the desk. The sketchbook has me pinned here. I do not know how I am writing this. Maybe I am not writing in the normal sense at all. There is no keyboard beneath my hands and no pen between my fingers. It feels more like the book is pulling the thoughts directly out of my head and forcing them into the paper. I am becoming the ink. Every memory, every fear, every final piece of who I am is being dragged out of me and pressed into the fibers of these pages. I can feel myself getting weaker with each sentence. Parts of my mind are already disappearing. So if anyone ever finds this, please listen carefully. Do not come looking for this house. Do not try to prove that this story is real. If you ever see the house listed for sale, keep scrolling, close the page, forget the address. Whatever you do, do not step inside. You do not want to know what it feels like to be drawn. I used to believe houses had memories. I know that sounds strange, but I never meant it literally. I thought old houses remembered people through stains on the floor, scratches on door frames, faded wallpaper, and forgotten objects left inside closets. I liked the idea that a home could carry little pieces of the families that had once lived there. A mark on the wall where someone measured a child's height. A burned spot near a fireplace. A loose floorboard that creaked because thousands of feet had crossed it. That was what I meant when I said a house could remember. I had no idea how wrong I was. Some houses do not just remember. Some houses hunger. The one Lily and I bought had been empty for years, and by the time we moved in, it was starving. It was a huge Victorian house sitting at the edge of a quiet road, surrounded by trees that had grown wild and thick around it. From the outside, it looked like a place someone had forgotten halfway through dying. The paint was cracked and peeling. One of the upstairs shutters hung crooked. Ivy crawled up the brick like green fingers. The front porch leaned slightly to one side, and the windows were tall and narrow, reflecting the sky in dark, uneven shapes. But when I first saw it, I thought it was beautiful. Not beautiful in a clean or modern way. Beautiful because it had history, and because it was cheap. After my divorce, money was tight. I wanted somewhere Lily and I could start again, somewhere that belonged to us instead of being another rented apartment filled with reminders of everything that had gone wrong. The house needed work, but I told myself that was part of the charm. I imagined repainting the rooms, fixing the porch, cleaning the old fireplaces, maybe planting flowers out front. I pictured Lily running through the halls while I worked downstairs. I thought we were beginning a new life. Lily was 7 years old when we moved in. She was everything to me. After the divorce, it really did feel like the two of us against the world. She had this bright, wild energy that filled every room she entered. She talked constantly. She asked questions about everything. She sang songs with half the words wrong. She left toys everywhere and somehow always lost one shoe. She loved drawing. But back then, she drew the things children normally draw. Cats with 6 legs, purple suns, people with giant heads and stick arms, houses with smoke coming from chimneys even when there was no fireplace. She would run up to me, holding a piece of paper, and demand that I guess what it was. If I guessed wrong, she would laugh so hard that she could barely explain it. Her laugh was my favorite sound in the world. It was warm and loud and impossible to ignore. After everything with the divorce, that laugh helped me believe I had not ruined her life. When she was scared at night, she squeezed my hand so hard my fingers hurt. When I was sad, she would somehow know even if I tried to hide it. She was my little light. And within 2 weeks of moving into that house, that light began to fade. At first, the changes were small. She stopped talking as much during breakfast. She would sit at the kitchen table, staring toward the hallway while her cereal went soft in the bowl. I would ask her what she was looking at. "Nothing," she would say. Then she stopped playing with her dolls. She had brought a whole box of them from our old apartment, but after we moved into the house, they stayed packed. When I asked why, she said she was too old for them. That surprised me because only a few weeks earlier, she had thrown a tantrum when I suggested donating one. Then she stopped asking for bedtime stories. That worried me more. Lily had always loved stories. Even if she was exhausted, she would beg for one more chapter, one more page, one more story before I turned out the light. Now, when I entered her room at night with a book, she would shake her head. "I'm tired, Mom." But she was not sleeping. I would sometimes pass her room an hour later and see light beneath the door. She had started spending almost every free moment sitting at the old wooden desk near her bedroom window. That desk had come with the house. So had the sketchbook. She found it in the attic during our first week there. The attic was packed with old furniture, broken lamps, trunks, dusty curtains, and boxes left behind by previous owners. Most of it looked worthless. The sketchbook was different. It was huge, too large for a child to carry comfortably. The cover was thick brown leather, scratched and stained with age. There was no title on the front, no name, no date. The paper inside was yellowed but strangely clean. I remember telling Lily she could keep it. I wish I had burned it. From the day she found that book, she became obsessed with it. She would sit at the desk for hours, hunched over the pages, drawing, not humming, not talking, just drawing. The sound of pencils scratching against paper became normal in the house. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Sometimes it continued long after midnight. I asked her several times what she was drawing. At first, she would only shrug. Then one evening, she finally answered. "Mr. Tall is helping me." I was standing in the doorway of her room. She did not turn around when she said it. "Who is Mr. Tall?" She lifted one hand and pointed toward the far corner. There was nothing there except peeling wallpaper and an old wooden chair. "He lives there." I smiled because I thought this was just an imaginary friend. Most parents hear stories like that. Children invent people. They give them names. They blame them for broken toys. They talk to empty chairs. I told myself there was nothing unusual about it. "What does Mr. Tall help you with?" I asked. Lily kept drawing. "The house." "What about the house?" "He says it's unfinished." Something about the way she spoke made me uncomfortable. Her voice sounded flat, not playful, not imaginative. It sounded like she was repeating instructions. I stepped farther into the room. "What does that mean?" She finally looked over her shoulder at me. "He's teaching me how to draw the veins." I remember laughing nervously. "The veins?" "The parts under the walls." Then she turned back to the sketchbook. "He says every house has them." I tried to convince myself that she had heard some renovation talk from me. I had been discussing wiring, pipes, and support beams with contractors since we moved in. Maybe she had picked up some of those words. Maybe that was all it was. But Mr. Tall did not disappear like a normal imaginary friend. He became more important. Lily started talking about him every day. Mr. Tall did not like the curtains. Mr. Tall said a wall downstairs was sick. Mr. Tall said the stairs were missing something. Mr. Tall said the house wanted to be finished. I asked her what Mr. Tall looked like. She stared at me for several seconds before answering. "Too long." That was all she said. During those weeks, Lily also began looking sick. Dark circles formed beneath her eyes. Her skin became pale. She lost interest in food. Sometimes I had to remind her to eat. She would take 3 bites, then glance toward the stairs as though someone were waiting for her. At night, I heard her talking quietly in her bedroom. Sometimes it sounded like she was asking questions. Other times, she seemed to be listening. Once, I stood outside her door for nearly 10 minutes. I heard Lily whispering, then silence, then whispering again. There was enough space between her sentences for someone else to be answering. I almost opened the door. I should have. Instead, I returned to bed and told myself I was becoming paranoid. Everything changed one afternoon. I had been cleaning downstairs when I heard a strange scraping sound coming from Lily's room. It was louder than the normal scratching of pencil on paper. I went upstairs. Her bedroom door was open. She was sitting at the desk, drawing so violently that her whole arm shook. The pencil moved in fast, sharp lines, back and forth, back and forth. She looked terrified. "Lily?" She did not answer. I walked toward her. "What are you doing?" "Nothing." I reached for the sketchbook. Before my fingers touched it, Lily slammed the cover shut. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. I jumped. She turned toward me, pressing both hands against the book. "No, Mom." Her face was pale and frightened. For 1 second, I thought she was afraid of me. Then I noticed where she was looking. Not at me. Behind me. Toward the empty corner of the room. "You can't see it yet," she said. I looked over my shoulder. Nothing. "See what?" "Mr. Tall said no." She swallowed. "It's a surprise." Something changed in the room. The temperature dropped so quickly that I saw my own breath. The hairs on my arms lifted. I turned toward the corner again. Still nothing. But suddenly I knew something was standing there. I cannot explain that feeling. It was not imagination. It was the physical awareness of another presence. The same feeling you get when someone is standing directly behind you, even before you turn around. Only this presence felt enormous. I felt pressure in my chest. My ears seemed to close. The room became completely silent. Even the sounds from outside disappeared. I smelled something dry and dusty. Cedar wood, old paper, and graphite. Wet graphite. I stared into the empty corner. My eyes told me nothing was there. Every other part of my body screamed that something was watching me. Not just watching, judging, warning me. I backed away from Lily. She stayed between me and the sketchbook. I left the room, and for the rest of that evening, I tried to behave normally. I made dinner. Lily barely ate. I asked her about school. She gave short answers. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the hallway. When I asked if she was okay, she smiled. It was not her normal smile. That night, I made her get into bed early. I stayed with her until she fell asleep. She did not toss or turn. She simply became still, too still. I placed my hand near her nose to make sure she was breathing. She was. But her sleep looked almost unnatural, heavy, empty, like someone had switched her off. I waited another hour. Then I went back into her room. The sketchbook was on the desk. Open. That frightened me immediately because I clearly remembered Lily closing it. I stepped closer. A charcoal pencil rested beside it. The page was covered with lines. I expected to see some strange child's drawing. Instead, I saw our living room. Not a simple picture. A technical drawing. A perfect architectural plan. Every measurement looked exact. The windows, the doors, the fireplace, the baseboards, the electrical outlets, even the position of the light switches. I stared at the drawing for several seconds before I understood what bothered me most. It showed things that should not have been visible. Behind the walls, lines represented electrical wiring, water pipes, wooden beams, the structure beneath the floor. I flipped the page. The kitchen, same level of detail. The plumbing behind the cabinets, the wiring inside the ceiling, a damaged support beam beneath the floor. I had not known that beam was damaged. A contractor found it 3 days later. I turned another page. The stairs, another. The attic, another. The basement. Page after page, the entire house had been drawn like a body being opened for surgery. That was when I remembered what Lily had said. The veins. My hands began shaking. I kept turning pages. Near the back, I found the upstairs hallway. I recognized it instantly. Lily's door, my bedroom, the bathroom, the narrow window at the end of the hall. Everything was there. And in the middle of the drawing, someone had made a large black X. I stared at it. Then I looked down. I was standing in that exact place. The temperature dropped, not slowly, instantly. It felt like all the heat had been sucked from the hallway. Pain shot through my teeth. My breath appeared white in front of my face. Then something began happening on the page. The black X moved. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Then the ink began gathering around it. Thin lines crawled across the paper. One became two. Two became dozens. They twisted together, forming the outline of a person. A very tall person. The legs were too long. The arms bent in the wrong places. The shoulders were narrow. The fingers looked like pieces of broken wire. I wanted to drop the sketchbook. I could not move. The figure finished drawing itself, then it rose from the page. There is no better way to describe it. The black lines lifted from the paper like smoke. They stretched upward, thickened, folded. And suddenly the thing was not inside the book anymore. It was in the hallway, behind me. A shadow fell across my body. My muscles locked. I could move my eyes, but nothing else. So I looked sideways. I saw him, Mr. Tall. His head nearly touched the ceiling. His skin looked gray, almost like paper covered with charcoal dust. His body was thin beyond anything human. His arms reached almost to his knees. His fingers were long and dark at the ends. His face was difficult to understand. I remember eyes, or places where eyes should have been. Dark hollows. and a mouth that looked like someone had started drawing it and stopped halfway. He did not look at me. He looked at Lily's bedroom door. His whole body seemed tense with anticipation. The door creaked open. Lily stood there. She should have been asleep. Instead, she was smiling. I will never forget that smile. It was too wide. It stretched across her small face in a way that looked painful. Her eyes were open but empty. She looked at Mr. Tall, then at me, and she laughed. It sounded like Lily's laugh. That was the worst part. It was the same bright, sweet laugh I had loved since she was a toddler. Only now it sounded wrong, like glass breaking. She walked past me. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. I tried to reach for her. My arms would not move. Lily sat at the desk. Mr. Tall moved behind her. He placed one long hand on her shoulder. Charcoal dust fell from his fingers. He pointed toward the pencil. Lily picked it up, then she looked at me, and there was no fear in her face, no confusion, no recognition. She looked at me the way an artist looks at an object they are about to draw. Then she lowered the pencil. The moment it touched the page, pain exploded through my body. She drew a line across my waist. I felt something cut through me, not through my skin, through my shape. My spine snapped with a sound like dry wood breaking. My body flattened sideways against the wall. I tried to scream. My mouth opened, but only a rough scratching sound came out. Lily giggled. She drew another line. My left arm changed. It became thinner, then flat, then nothing more than a dark mark beside me. I could still feel it. That was the horror. Even after my arm became a line, I could feel what had happened to it. She started shading. Each movement of the pencil rubbed away more of my body. My chest flattened. My clothes became shapes of gray and black. My hair became a collection of strokes. Mr. Tall leaned closer to Lily. His chest vibrated. There was no sound, but I could feel his excitement inside my skull. The walls began creaking. The pipes knocked. The floorboards groaned. The entire house seemed alive, happy, hungry. Lily drew my face. My nose disappeared first, then my ears. Then she shaded my eyes. My vision narrowed. The room became smaller. Darkness surrounded everything except two tiny circles in front of me. I realized I was seeing through the eyes she had drawn. That is how I am still seeing now. I do not know how much time has passed. Minutes, hours, maybe longer. Time does not seem normal anymore. I'm almost completely inside the sketchbook. Parts of me remain in the room, but I can feel them fading. My legs are only lines. My hands are black smudges. My face feels like paper. The sketchbook has pinned what remains of me to the desk, and now it is forcing me to write. Not with my fingers, with myself. Every sentence takes something from me. A memory, a feeling, a piece of my name. I am bleeding my thoughts into the paper. The book wants this record. I understand that now. It needs a witness. Every transformation must be documented. Every person who becomes part of the house has to understand what is happening before the end. Maybe that fear feeds it. Maybe this is part of the drawing. Lily is still beside me. She has not stopped smiling. She works quickly now, confidently, like she has been doing this for years. Sometimes she pauses, and Mr. Tall points to a part of the page. Then she continues. I want to tell her I love her. I want to tell her to run. I want to tell her that none of this is her fault. But I cannot speak. My mouth is not a mouth anymore. It is a charcoal outline. Mr. Tall watches every stroke. He never talks. I do not think he needs words. The house speaks for him. The floors, the walls, the pipes, the cracking wood. the low vibration behind the plaster. They're all parts of the same thing. I understand something now that I wish I did not. Mr. Tall does not live in the house. He is the house. Or maybe he is what the house uses when it needs hands. The sketchbook is not just a book either. It is a plan, a blueprint, a place where the house designs what it wants. And Lily, God, Lily is becoming part of it too. I can see charcoal under her fingernails. There are thin gray lines moving beneath the skin of her wrist. She does not notice them. Or maybe she does. Maybe she likes them. I do not know if my daughter is still somewhere inside that smiling face. I hope she is. I almost hope she is not. Because if she is still in there, then she is watching herself do this to me. The pencil touches the page again. Pain. She is working on my mouth now. Each stroke makes the darkness heavier. Mr. Tall turns his head toward me. For the first time, he is looking directly at me. I understand what happens next. When Lily finishes, he will close the book. When the cover shuts, whatever remains of me in this hallway will disappear. I will become part of the drawing, maybe part of the wall, maybe one of the hidden shapes beneath the wallpaper. Maybe the next family that moves here will notice a strange outline in Lily's old room. Maybe a child will peel back a loose strip of paper and find my face beneath it. Maybe they will think it is just a stain. If you are that person, please do not look closely. Do not touch it. Do not trace the lines. Do not bring the sketchbook downstairs. Do not let your child open it. And if a little voice tells you that someone named Mr. Tall lives in the corner, take your child and leave immediately. Do not pack. Do not search the attic. Do not investigate the walls. Do not tell yourself it is imagination. Run. Leave the house behind. Burn your clothes if you have to. Change your name. Move somewhere far away. Just do not let the house finish you. The book is taking the last pieces of me now. I am having trouble remembering my own face. I can remember Lily as a baby. I can remember holding her in the hospital. I can remember her first steps, her first day at school. I remember her squeezing my hand when she was afraid. I remember her laugh. I am trying to hold on to that sound. Not the laugh she made tonight. The real one. The warm one. The one that filled a room. It is getting quieter in my head. Lily lifts the pencil. Mr. Tall bends over her. The house becomes completely still. She places the pencil back onto the paper. Another line. My lips vanish. Another. My jaw becomes flat. Another. The last light in the room narrows. Mr. Tall is reaching toward the cover. His fingers stretch across the leather. I can feel the darkness waiting inside the book. Please, if you find this, believe me, if you see the listing, keep scrolling. If you pass this house and notice someone standing behind an upstairs window, do not stop. If you see a tall, gray shape beside them, do not look twice. And if you ever find an old leather sketchbook sitting open on a desk, no matter how empty the pages appear, do not draw inside it. Do not even touch the paper. Because once the house notices you, it starts learning your shape. Once it knows your shape, it teaches someone how to copy it. And when the drawing is finished, there is nowhere left to run. Lily is shading my mouth. I can feel the charcoal filling it. The darkness is spreading through me. Mr. Tall's hand is on the cover. Lily is laughing again. I cannot hear her anymore. I only remember what her laugh used to sound like. The cover is closing. Please, do not look. You do not want to know what it feels like to be drawn. Story 3. Every day, on my way to work and again on my way home, I drive past the same stretch of woods. They sit right beside the highway, so close that it almost feels like the trees are leaning toward the road. The woods are thick, too. Not the kind where you can look between the trunks and see sunlight on the other side. These trees grow close together, packed so tightly that after 20 or 30 feet, everything becomes a wall of branches, leaves, and darkness. During the day, it does not bother me much. In daylight, they just look like trees. At night, though, they are different. The highway runs right beside them, and there is almost no space between the pavement and the beginning of the forest. The city keeps the branches trimmed enough so they do not scrape passing cars, but whoever takes care of the place does not seem interested in anything beyond that. The trees stay wild, twisted, and crowded together. I have been driving that road for nearly 3 years. My truck is an old pickup that has probably seen better decades, let alone better days. Different parts of the truck are different colors because I have replaced panels whenever I could find cheap ones. One door is faded blue, the hood is gray, and most of the body is some color that might have been red 20 years ago. It rattles when I go above 60. The driver's side door has to be kicked before it opens properly. The heater works when it feels like it. And the radio sometimes cuts out if I hit a pothole. But it gets me to work. That is all I need. Most evenings, when I'm coming home, I try not to look toward those woods. There is nothing special about them. At least that is what I always told myself. Anyone who has been tired late at night knows what shadows can do to your mind. You stare at something long enough, and your brain starts building shapes out of nothing. A branch looks like an arm. A tree stump looks like somebody standing beside the road. 2 bright leaves suddenly look like eyes. It is the same thing that happens when you wake up in the middle of the night and see a jacket hanging on a chair. For 2 seconds, you are convinced someone is sitting there watching you. Then you turn on the light and realize how stupid you were. That is how I always treated those woods. Sometimes I would catch what looked like movement between the trees. I would look again, and there would be nothing there. Sometimes moonlight would hit a branch at the right angle and make me think somebody had stepped behind a tree. I learned not to look. The woods are on my right when I drive home, and there is no sidewalk there anyway. No reason to expect bikers, joggers, or pedestrians. So most nights, I turn on a podcast or some music and keep my eyes on the road. That worked fine for almost 3 years, until a few nights ago. I was coming home after another long shift. It was late, although I do not remember exactly what time. Definitely dark enough that my headlights were doing most of the work. I had something playing through the speakers, but I was not really listening to it. I was tired, thinking about getting home, feeding my dog, eating something easy, and going to sleep. Then I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Not just movement. Color, a deep brown. It appeared between the trees for maybe half a second. I immediately thought deer. That was the reasonable answer. We do not get many deer around where I live, especially because of the cold, but it was not impossible. Animals wander. Maybe one had gotten lost. Maybe it had come down looking for food. Still, seeing one there would have been unusual. I kept driving. A few seconds passed before I glanced toward the woods again. Nothing. Just trees. I looked back at the road. Then I thought I saw movement again. Something seemed to pass behind 2 trunks. I knew I was probably imagining it by that point. Once your brain decides there might be something in the darkness, every shadow becomes proof. I kept driving. Another mile. Then another. By the time I had gone 3 or 4 miles, whatever I had seen was far behind me. That should have been the end of it. But the thought stayed in my head. What had it been? A deer? A person? Just a shadow? I knew I would probably spend the whole night thinking about it if I did not check, so I slowed down. There was not much traffic that night, and eventually I brought the truck to a stop near the side of the road. Even while stopping, I knew how stupid it was. I was several miles past where I thought I had seen the thing. There was no chance I was going to find it now. Still, I wanted to clear my head. I leaned across the passenger seat and opened the glove box. Inside was the usual collection of junk. Old receipts, a few tools, spare fuses, pens that probably did not work, a pocket knife, random paperwork. I dug through all of it until I found my flashlight. It was an old military-style flashlight I had owned for years. Heavy, ugly, and almost impossible to break. Almost. The batteries were weak, but when I tested it, a dim beam came on. Good enough. I switched off the engine and climbed out. Getting the driver's side door open required the usual routine. Push against it with my shoulder, kick the bottom, then pull the handle. The door finally opened with a rough metal groan. I stepped onto the road and shoved my keys into my pocket. Then I closed the door. The road felt much quieter outside the truck. That is something you do not notice while driving. Even an old truck creates its own little world of engine noise, rattling metal, music, heater fans, and tires against pavement. The second I was standing outside, I realized how silent everything around me was. No traffic, no voices, no wind strong enough to move the trees. Just the woods. I turned toward them and switched on the flashlight. The beam flickered, then went out. "Come on," I muttered. I shook it. The light came back, then died again. I twisted the bottom, checked the batteries, tapped it against my palm. Nothing. Most people probably would have used their phone flashlight. I could have. But phone flashlights never feel powerful enough when you are trying to see deep into dark woods. They are fine for finding your keys under a couch. Not so much for checking whether something is standing 20 feet inside a forest. I slapped the flashlight again. Nothing. The batteries were dead. I sighed and looked toward the trees. Without the flashlight, the woods somehow looked even darker than before. Moonlight touched the tops of some branches, but everything underneath was black. That was when I got that feeling. You know the one. That little warning your body gives you even when your brain cannot explain why. The hair on my arms rose. My stomach tightened. Suddenly, standing beside that highway did not seem like a good idea. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I had been driving past those woods for years. Nothing had ever happened. Still, I turned back toward the truck. I reached for the driver's side door and went through the stupid process again. Kick, shoulder, handle. The door opened. I climbed inside. For one brief second, I thought about leaving the door open while I searched for batteries. Then that uncomfortable feeling returned. I pulled it closed. It shut with a heavy metal slam. I turned toward the glove box and started digging through it again. My hands were shaking a little. That annoyed me more than anything. I knew I was scared for no reason, and knowing that somehow made it worse, I kept searching. I was sure I had another pack of batteries somewhere. Then I heard something. A quiet creak. Sharp. Close. I stopped moving. The sound had come from behind me. Before I could turn, there was another noise. Thunk. Metal against metal. I spun around. Someone was standing directly beside my driver's side door. I jumped so hard I hit my shoulder against the seat. I will admit it. I made a sound I am not proud of. The man was standing so close to the truck that he could have rested his chin on the roof. For a second, I could barely understand what I was seeing. Then the light from the dashboard and the weak glow from the road showed me his uniform. State trooper. Brown uniform. Wide-brimmed hat. Badge. Everything looked right. He leaned down slightly so he could see me through the window. One of his hands moved away from the door. That was when I realized what the metal thunk had been. He had tried the handle. He had tried to open my truck. I did not know what to do with that information. The trooper took one slow step backward. Then he raised both hands, almost like he wanted to show me he was not trying to cause trouble. There was something small in one of them, but I could not tell what it was. I was still breathing hard. Then he smiled. It was not some creepy, unnatural smile like you see in horror movies. That almost would have been easier. It was just a normal smile. Warm, a little embarrassed, friendly. Thought it was abandoned, he called through the closed window. Sorry about that. I stared at him for a second. Then I nodded. You scared the hell out of me. Apologies. He tipped his hat. Then he lifted the small thing in his hand. You dropped it. Oh. I looked at whatever he was holding. Could not tell what it was. I have never been the kind of person who wants trouble with the police. Normally, if an officer says you dropped something, you open the door, take it, say thank you, and move on. But something did not feel right. Maybe it was because he had tried the handle. Maybe it was because I had not heard him arrive. Maybe it was because the road was so quiet. I hesitated. The troopers seemed to notice. To his credit, he did not get angry. He gave a small, awkward laugh, bent down, and placed the object on the pavement beside my truck. Then he tipped his hat again. Have a good night. He turned and walked away. That was when I noticed his car. It was parked some distance behind me. I had not heard it pull up. Not at all. And this road was silent enough that I should have heard an engine from half a mile away. I watched him walk toward the vehicle. Slow steps, relaxed, no hurry. He reached the driver's side door, opened it, and climbed inside. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the engine started. It roared so loudly that I jumped again. The sound echoed through the woods. After a few seconds, the engine settled into a low rumble. Then, strangely, it became almost silent. The patrol car began moving, slowly, very slowly. Maybe 10 miles an hour on a road with a speed limit of 60. The car crawled past me. The trooper kept looking straight ahead. His windows were slightly tinted, so I could not see much inside. As the back of his vehicle came into view, I noticed something hanging from it. Brown fur. My brain took a second to understand. A deer. There was a dead deer hanging off the back of the car. Its body bounced whenever the vehicle hit a crack or a pothole. Its legs hung loose. Its head moved from side to side. Drops of blood fell onto the road behind it. I sat there watching until the car disappeared into the darkness. Then it was gone. The trooper, the patrol car, the deer, everything. Only after that did I realize I had been holding my breath. I exhaled slowly. For some reason, the woods did not feel as scary anymore. Compared to whatever had just happened, trees seemed harmless. Still, I had stopped for a reason. I wanted to know what I had seen. And there was also whatever the officer had left beside my truck. I considered simply driving home. That would have been the smart decision. But curiosity is a stupid thing. Eventually, I opened the door. Kick. Shoulder. Handle. It groaned open. I stayed inside for a moment, looking around. No patrol car, No people. Nothing. I leaned down and felt along the pavement for the object the trooper had left. My fingers touched a small cardboard package. Batteries. Brand new batteries. I stared at them. That did not make sense. He had said I dropped them. I had not. I knew exactly what was inside my truck, mostly because there was not much worth stealing. I had never bought those batteries. Still, I needed batteries for the flashlight. And by then, I wanted the whole situation finished. So I opened the package. I put the fresh batteries into the flashlight and pressed the button. Bright white light filled the cab. Worked perfectly. Army issue, I muttered to myself. I stepped outside. This time I kept my head moving, checking the road, the woods, and the darkness behind my truck. Nothing. I walked a few steps toward the tree line. Then I raised the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness. Trees, branches, leaves, dead grass, sticks, nothing else. No deer, no person, no animal. I slowly moved the light from side to side. Still nothing. Eventually, I laughed under my breath. I had scared myself. That was all. Probably saw a branch moving in the wind. Maybe a bird. Maybe some trash. Anything. I felt better. I turned back toward the truck. Once again, I reached for the door. Kick. Shoulder. Handle. The door opened, and suddenly an engine roared somewhere behind me. I turned. Headlights appeared in the distance. Fast. Very fast. For half a second, I thought some idiot was racing down the highway. Then I recognized the vehicle. The same patrol car. The same trooper. He was coming back. I raised one hand, thinking maybe he had forgotten something. The car flew past me. 90 miles an hour at least. Maybe faster. The engine was so loud I covered one ear as the car passed. The wind from it hit my clothes, and on the back was the deer. Same deer. Still dead. Still hanging there. Except now it looked worse. Much worse. The first time I saw it, the animal had looked freshly dead. This time, its fur looked dirty and wet. Parts of its body seemed darker. The skin looked loose. For one horrible second, I thought I could see bone. Maybe I got a better look this time. Maybe the lighting made it seem worse. I do not know. I did not stay around to study it. All I remember thinking was, no, absolutely not. I got inside my truck. I slammed the door. I started the engine, and I drove. I pushed that old truck harder than I probably ever have before. The steering wheel shook. The engine complained. Every loose piece of metal rattled. I did not care. I was doing nearly 80 before I realized it. My heart was pounding. Sweat was running down my back even though the night was cold. I kept checking the mirrors. No headlights followed me. Still, I did not slow down until I got close to town. Then another thought hit me. If I got pulled over now, I would probably have a heart attack, especially if the officer was wearing a brown uniform. So I slowed down. I live outside town on a small back road. It is not hard to reach, but there are not many houses around. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was later than usual. Nobody was waiting for me except my dog, Lucy. She came running when I opened the front door. Normally, I like having a dog in a quiet place. It makes you feel less alone. That night, I was especially happy to see her. I locked the door behind me, then checked it again. I fed Lucy. I made myself something simple to eat, although I barely tasted any of it. I kept replaying the night in my head. The flashlight, the trooper, the new batteries, the deer, the patrol car driving slowly, then the same patrol car coming back at almost 100 miles an hour. I thought about calling someone. But what would I say? A strange police officer gave me batteries and had a deer attached to his car. It sounded ridiculous. Maybe he had driven somewhere and turned around. Maybe the deer only looked rotten because of the headlights. Maybe I was exhausted. That explanation was easier, so I took some sleeping pills. Not enough to do anything stupid, just enough to make sure I would not lie awake thinking about the woods. Eventually, I went to bed. I slept harder than I expected. Then, early the next morning, barking woke me up. Lucy. She barks at everything. Birds, cars, wind. Sometimes absolutely nothing. Normally, I tell her to stop and go back to sleep. But that morning, she would not stop. The barking was different. Sharp. Angry. She kept running toward the front door, then backing away. I sat up. Sunlight was already coming through the curtains. For a few seconds, I had forgotten about the night before. Then everything came back. I got dressed and walked into the living room. Lucy, quiet. She ignored me. Her eyes were fixed on the door. There's nothing out there. I said it mostly to myself. I walked toward the door. Lucy followed a few feet behind me, still barking. I unlocked it. Then I opened it. At first, I did not understand what I was looking at. My truck was sitting in the driveway. Every window was broken. Not cracked. Broken. The windshield was shattered. Both side windows were gone. The rear window was smashed in. Glass covered the seats and ground. One mirror hung by its wires. The other was missing completely. The driver's side door was open, wide open. For a second, I thought someone had robbed me. Then I looked closer. There was a boot print on the door, a big one, right near the bottom. Almost exactly where I always kick it, when I'm trying to open it. I stood there staring. Lucy stopped barking. That scared me more than the barking had. I slowly looked past the truck. Something was standing in the yard. A deer. Alive. It was eating my grass. Calm as anything. I could hear it tearing at the ground. For several seconds, I just stared. Then it raised its head. It looked directly at me. There was nothing obviously wrong with it. No blood, no broken legs, no wounds. Just a deer, standing in my yard, watching me. I did not move. Neither did Lucy. The deer slowly chewed whatever was in its mouth. Then it took another step closer to the truck. I thought about the thing I had seen in the woods. That flash of brown. I thought about the dead deer hanging behind the trooper's car. I thought about seeing the same car twice. I thought about those new batteries. Then I looked at the boot print again. Someone had been at my house. Someone had walked right up to my truck. Someone had kicked that door. And somehow every window had been smashed without waking me. That was the part that bothered me the most. I am not a heavy sleeper. Lucy definitely is not. If someone had broken one truck window, she would have lost her mind, but every window was gone. Everyone, and neither of us had heard anything. The deer kept staring at me. I slowly closed the front door. I locked it. Then I stood there with my hand still on the lock. Lucy looked up at me. Outside, I could hear something moving through the grass. I did not look through the window. I did not want to know whether the deer was still there. Maybe there is a perfectly reasonable explanation for all of this. Maybe some teenagers destroyed my truck. Maybe that trooper was just strange. Maybe the patrol car had taken some road that looped around. Maybe the deer in my yard had nothing to do with the dead one. Maybe every single strange thing that happened that night was just coincidence. That is what I keep telling myself. But here is the problem. I have lived in this area a long time. And like I said before, we do not really get deer around here. Not like that. Not standing in somebody's yard. not calmly watching through an open doorway. And now I have to go back to work tomorrow. There's only one road that gets me there without adding nearly an hour to the drive. That road goes past the woods. The same woods. I have passed them every day for almost 3 years. I used to think the shadows between those trees were only shadows. I used to tell myself that if I stared too long, my mind would create shapes that were not really there. Maybe I was right. Maybe there was never anything in those woods. But after what happened, I keep thinking about one thing. That first flash of brown. I keep wondering if it really was a deer. And if it was, I keep wondering what it was running from. Story 4. I have never been the kind of person who enjoys being around a lot of people. Even when I was younger, I preferred spending time alone. Some people might call that unhealthy, and maybe they are right. But isolation has always made me feel comfortable. Being alone means I do not have to worry about conversations, expectations, or pretending to be interested in things I do not care about. Most of the time, I am perfectly happy sitting in my room with my computer, playing games, or talking online with the few people I have managed to stay close to. A few weeks ago, my mom noticed something strange about the screen covering my bedroom window. There was a small slit in it. It was not a large tear, and nobody could have reached an arm through it. Still, it was neat and straight enough that it did not look accidental. We had recently moved into an area that was not exactly known for being safe. Break-ins were not common enough to happen every night, but they were common enough that people kept their doors locked and paid attention when something looked wrong. When my mom noticed the cut, she immediately assumed somebody had been messing around near my window. What she did not know was that I was the one who had made it. I had needed to exchange something with a friend without bringing attention to it. The things involved were not exactly legal, and at the time, cutting a small opening in the screen seemed like an easy solution. Looking back, there were probably a dozen smarter ways to handle it. I just had not thought that far ahead. I also had no intention of admitting that to my mom. When she found the slit, she got worried quickly. That did not surprise me. My mom has always been someone who reacts strongly when she thinks something might be dangerous. Sometimes she is right, but other times she can turn a small problem into something much bigger in her head. I tried telling her that it was probably nothing. Maybe a branch had caught it. Maybe something sharp had damaged it during the move. She did not believe either explanation. The real problem started the next day when she came home with a security camera. It was one of those outdoor cameras with a motion sensor and a bright LED floodlight attached to it. She had my dad install it near the backyard, positioned so that it could watch the area around my bedroom window. At first, I was not bothered. Like I said, I do not spend much time outside. I rarely leave the house unless I need to, and I had no reason to sneak out of my bedroom window. So having a camera outside should not have affected me at all. If anything, I thought it might help. I have always been anxious about windows, especially at night. The house was still new to us, and I did not have curtains yet. My room faced the backyard, and when the lights inside were on, the window turned into a dark mirror. I could see my own reflection, but beyond that reflection was nothing but blackness. I hated thinking about the possibility of someone standing outside where I could not see them. So during the first few nights, the camera actually made me feel safer. Whenever something moved outside, the floodlight would turn on and fill most of the backyard with harsh white light. I could look outside, check the area, and then go back to whatever I had been doing. For the first few days, there was always an obvious reason for the light. Sometimes it was a squirrel. Once it was a rabbit that froze in the middle of the yard when the light suddenly came on. Another time, it was a stray cat moving along the fence. Every time, there was something, until there was not. I noticed it properly around the 5th night after the camera had been installed. I was sitting at my computer playing Terraria with a few friends. We were using the Calamity mod, and I was focused on the game while talking to them over voice chat. The floodlight outside had already turned on twice that evening. The first time I looked outside and saw a rabbit sitting near the edge of the yard. The second time, I did not bother checking for long. I assumed it was probably the same rabbit or another small animal. Then the light came on a third time. For some reason, that one bothered me. I stopped playing and turned toward the window. Usually, whenever the floodlight came on, whatever had triggered it would freeze for a few seconds. Animals seemed just as surprised by the sudden light as I was. They would stop moving and look around before eventually running off or continuing through the yard. I stared outside, waiting to spot something. There was nothing. I leaned closer to the window. The backyard was completely still. No rabbit, no cat, no squirrel, nothing moving near the fence, nothing hiding underneath the bushes. I kept watching, expecting something to appear. After almost a minute, I felt a strange pressure in my stomach. It was not exactly fear. It was more like my body was telling me to stop looking. Every instinct I had suddenly wanted me to move away from the glass. So I did. I returned to my computer and tried to focus on the game. The floodlight came on 2 more times that night. Both times I checked. Both times I saw nothing. When I finally went to sleep, I turned my back toward the window. I remember telling myself that the camera was probably faulty. Maybe insects were flying close enough to the sensor. Maybe leaves were moving in the wind. There had to be some normal explanation. The next morning, I brought it up casually while eating breakfast. My mom was standing near the counter pouring herself orange juice while I spread cream cheese on a bagel. "The camera light kept turning on last night," I said. She looked at me. "I know. I got one alert." I paused. "One?" "Yeah," she said. "There was a rabbit. Brown, I think." I'd seen that rabbit. That was probably the first time the light had turned on. But I had seen it activate several more times after that. "Was there anything else?" I asked. "Maybe bugs setting it off or something?" The light kept waking me up. My mom frowned. "I only got the one alert." For the first time, she looked slightly annoyed with the camera instead of worried about the yard. "Piece of junk must be faulty." I nodded like I agreed, but something about that answer bothered me. If the motion sensor had detected something strongly enough to activate the floodlight, why had the camera not sent an alert? Maybe the light and the recording system work separately. I did not know. I also did not want to sound paranoid. For the next few nights, things calmed down. The lights still came on sometimes, but not as often. Usually once, maybe twice. Sometimes there was an animal. Sometimes there was nothing. During that week, I finally ordered curtains for my window. I also asked my mom if she could just take the camera down. She refused. She said that even if the camera was having problems, the light was still useful because it would scare away anyone trying to walk through the backyard. At the time, I hoped she was right. Then my parents went out of town for the weekend. They were going to visit my aunt who lived in another state. They planned to be gone for a couple of days, which meant I would have the entire house to myself. Usually, I would have enjoyed that. Being alone for a weekend sounded perfect. The only company I had was our dog, June. June was a pit bull, but anyone who knew her understood that her appearance was completely misleading. She was one of the most nervous dogs I'd ever met. She was scared of loud noises. She hated thunderstorms. Once, I saw her run away from a fly because it buzzed too close to her face. She was gentle with everyone. She had never shown aggression toward another person in the years we had owned her. That is why the growling scared me so badly. I was sitting in my room when I heard it. At first, I did not even understand what the sound was. It was low and rough, almost like something vibrating underneath the bed. I turned around. June was standing on my mattress. She was facing the window. Her ears were raised. The fur along her back was standing up. Her entire body looked stiff. I had never seen her like that. June, she did not look at me. She kept staring at the window. I turned toward it. The backyard was dark. The floodlight was not on. I could not see anything outside. "Hey," I said softly, "calm down." I sat beside her and started rubbing her neck. Her growl slowly became a quiet whine. After a while, she lowered herself onto the bed and rested her head against the blanket. I assumed she needed to go outside. We usually did not let her wander freely in the yard. Instead, we had a metal lead connected near the front porch. It was long enough for her to walk several feet in different directions while still keeping her near the house. I got up and took her outside. Before attaching the lead, I looked around. That had become a habit since moving into the neighborhood. I checked the street. I looked toward the neighboring houses. I even glanced along the side of our home. Nobody was there. June immediately started sniffing around and then went to the bathroom. I relaxed slightly. Maybe that really had been the problem. I went back inside because I had left my phone on the desk in my bedroom. I walked down the hall and entered the room. My phone was exactly where I had left it. I reached toward it. That was when the entire room suddenly exploded with white light. The camera floodlight had turned on outside my window. I barely reacted. At that point, I had seen it happen so many times that it did not immediately frighten me. I grabbed my phone, slipped it into my pocket, and started turning toward the door. Then the light went out. I stopped. Something felt wrong. I looked back toward the window. The camera light usually stayed on for about 30 seconds. I had noticed that after watching it activate night after night, this time it had stayed on for maybe 3 seconds, maybe less. I slowly turned to face the window. Without the floodlight, the backyard was almost completely invisible. I could only see my reflection in the glass. My room behind me, the desk, the bed, the open doorway, and darkness beyond everything. I stood there staring. Then another flash filled the room. But this one was different. It was brighter, smaller, instant. It did not come from the security light. It looked exactly like a camera flash. For 1 second, the entire room became painfully white. Then the darkness returned. My brain seemed to stop working. I stood completely still. I remember trying to understand what I had just seen. A flash. Someone taking a picture. But from where? Outside? From the backyard? I kept telling myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe the security camera had malfunctioned. Maybe there was lightning somewhere far away. Maybe a car had driven past and reflected light into the window. But none of those explanations felt right. Then I heard June. She started barking from outside. Except barking does not properly describe the sound. June normally had a high, nervous bark. This was different. It was deep and violent. Each bark came out like a growling snap. Over and over, She sounded furious. I had never heard anything like it from her. "June!" I spun toward the door. For a second, I forgot about the window entirely. All I could think about was getting to her. I hurried down the hallway and toward the front of the house. Then I saw something that made me slow down. The main front door was open. I had left it that way when I went back for my phone. Only the glass storm door separated the inside of the house from the porch. I suddenly realized something else. The front porch was already filled with light. At first, I thought it was the porch light. Then I realized I did not remember turning it on. I moved closer. That was when I noticed the silence. June had stopped barking. Completely. "June?" No answer. I stepped closer to the glass door. A sudden flash exploded directly in front of me. I threw my hand over my eyes. For a moment, all I saw was white. Then the light vanished. As my vision started returning, I saw something moving outside the glass. A hand, holding a phone. The phone was being pulled away from the door. Someone had just taken a picture of me from the other side of the glass. I could not move. I do not know how long I stood there. It could have been 3 seconds. It could have been a full minute. Fear does strange things to time. Eventually, I forced myself forward. I looked through the glass. Nobody was standing on the porch. My eyes dropped toward the place where June's lead was attached. The metal hook was hanging loose. The lead had been pulled free. June was gone. "June!" My hand moved toward the storm door handle. My first instinct was to run outside. I wanted to call her name. I wanted to search the street. I wanted to find whoever had taken her. Then my hand stopped. Someone had been standing directly outside the front door. Someone had just taken my picture. And I was home alone. I slammed the main door shut. I locked the deadbolt. Then I locked every other lock we had. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely use my phone. My heart felt like it was hitting the inside of my ribs hard enough to hurt. I opened my contacts and called my mom. When she answered, I could hardly explain what had happened. I told her someone was outside. I told her someone had been taking pictures through my bedroom window. Then I told her June was gone. My mom did not argue or tell me I was overreacting. She told me to call the police immediately. Then she said they were getting in the car and coming home. I called the police. I stayed away from every window while I waited. I turned off most of the lights because I suddenly understood how visible I must have been from outside. Anyone in the yard could probably see straight into the house. I kept imagining someone standing against the wall beside one of the windows waiting for me to walk past. Every small sound made me jump. The refrigerator, the air conditioner, branches touching the house. I wanted to search for June more than anything, but I was terrified that going outside was exactly what the person wanted. When the police arrived, I was already crying. I hated myself for putting June outside. I kept thinking that if I had listened to her earlier, if I had taken her growling seriously, none of this would have happened. She had known something was wrong. I had ignored her. The officers asked me to explain everything from the beginning. I struggled through the story between shaking breaths. They searched the house first. Then they searched the yard. After a while, one officer called the others toward the back of the property. There was a tree line beyond the yard. Inside it, they found boot prints, not just one set. There were several prints overlapping one another in almost the exact same area. Whoever had made them had apparently stood there for a long time, or had returned to that same position repeatedly. The spot faced directly toward my bedroom window. One of the officers walked from the footprints toward the camera and looked at the angle. He told me the person could have stood there without being clearly captured. The trees and darkness created a blind spot. When he said that, I felt physically sick. I thought about every night the floodlight had turned on. Every time I had looked outside and seen nothing. Every time I had shrugged and gone back to playing games. If someone had been standing inside that tree line, they could have been watching me the entire time. Maybe when I looked through the window, they were looking straight back. Maybe the unexplained light had not been caused by rabbits or insects. Maybe the camera had been reacting to someone moving just outside its view. And then there were the photographs. Why take pictures of me? I could not understand that part. Was it some kind of stalking? Were they planning a robbery? Had someone been watching the house since we moved in? Did they know when my parents left? Every question made the situation worse. My parents returned several hours later. One of the police officers stayed outside the house while we waited for him. I think part of the reason was to help me feel safer. When my mom arrived, she barely had time to step through the door before I asked her to check the security camera footage. The camera app was on her phone. I needed to know what it had seen. She opened the app and searched through the recordings from earlier that night. It took a few minutes. Then she found it. I was watching her face before I even looked at the screen. Her jaw tightened. Her expression changed. That alone made me nervous. She turned the phone so I could see. The recording showed the backyard. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then there was a bright flash near my bedroom window. It seemed to come from somewhere near the tree line. The recording continued. From the front of the property, we could hear June barking. Her barking grew louder and more aggressive. Then June suddenly appeared in the footage. She ran through the backyard at full speed. I had never seen her run like that. She was barking and growling as she charged toward the trees. She was not running away from something. She was chasing something. Or someone. The video continued. June disappeared near the edge of the camera's view. That was it. No person ever appeared. No figure crossed the yard. No one ran through the trees. There was nobody. The police replayed the recording several times. The result was always the same. The flash appeared. June reacted. June ran. Nothing else was visible. Then another problem became obvious. The first flash had come from behind the house, near my bedroom window. But the second flash had happened at the front door. How could the same person move from the backyard to the front porch that quickly? There had barely been enough time. And why had June started barking before I reached the front door? If someone had been in the backyard, why was she reacting from the front of the house? The more we thought about it, the less sense it made. Maybe there had been two people. That was what one officer suggested. It was possible. One person in the backyard, another at the front. Maybe they had been working together. But if that was true, why had the camera never captured either of them? Why were there no clear footprints near the porch? And what had June heard? That question still bothers me more than anything. June was not brave. She was scared of things that most dogs would ignore. She would hide during storms. She would jump at unexpected noises. She once refused to walk past a plastic bag moving in the wind. What could have made that dog angry enough to break a metal lead? She did not slip out of it. She did not chew through it. She pulled hard enough to break free. And then she ran toward whatever was outside. I kept thinking about the way she had growled at my bedroom window earlier. She had heard or seen something before I did. Maybe she had smelled it. Maybe it had been standing in the darkness before the floodlight ever turned on. The curtains I ordered arrived the following day. I put them up immediately. I have not opened them since, not even during the day. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I cannot make myself do it. Every time I think about pulling them apart, I imagine someone standing outside, waiting, watching, holding a phone. I keep food and water on the front porch for June. I know there is a good chance she's gone. Maybe someone took her. Maybe she ran too far and got lost. Maybe something worse happened. But I still put fresh water outside every morning. I still leave food near the door every night. I keep hoping that one day I will hear scratching against the porch and open the door to find her standing there. So far, she has not returned. The police never found anyone. They also never found another clear explanation for the footprints. My mom has kept the security camera up. She says removing it would make things worse. I do not know whether I agree. Some nights I hear the floodlight click on outside. I can see the change in brightness around the edges of the curtains. I never look anymore. Sometimes the light stays on for 30 seconds. Sometimes it turns off after only a few. When that happens, I feel my entire body go cold. I lie in bed facing the wall. I tell myself not to move, not to make noise, not to check, because I keep thinking about those nights before everything happened. All those times the light came on and I looked outside. All those times I thought the backyard was empty. The police found footprints in the exact place someone would need to stand if they wanted to watch me without appearing clearly on the camera. That means there is a possibility that someone had been there almost every night. Maybe they watched me play games. Maybe they watched me sleep. Maybe they watched me stare directly toward them without ever realizing they were there. I still do not understand the photographs. I do not know who took them. I do not know why they wanted them. I do not know whether the person outside my bedroom window was the same person outside the front door. And I still cannot explain why nobody appeared on the recording. Sometimes I convince myself that there must have been two people. That explanation is frightening, but at least it makes sense. Two stalkers, two cameras, two positions. Maybe one scared June while the other waited near the door. Maybe they planned the entire thing. That is terrifying. But somehow the alternative frightens me more. Because when I replay the memory in my head, I remember June standing on my bed. I remember the fur rising along her spine. I remember her staring into the darkness. The floodlight had not activated yet. There had been no visible movement. Still, she knew something was there. And later, when she ran through the backyard, she was not looking confused. She was chasing something with purpose, something the camera did not capture, something none of us could see. I keep wondering what she saw. I keep wondering whether whatever she chased took her. And occasionally, very late at night, the motion light outside my window still turns on. No alert appears on my mom's phone. No animal appears in the camera recording. The light simply turns on for a few seconds. Then it shuts off. I never open the curtains to check anymore. I do not think I ever will. For most of my life, being alone made me feel safe. Now it is the thing I am most afraid of.